Hi, I'm Reverend Kate from the Center for Spiritual Living in Carlsbad, California. Only right now, I'm not in California. I'm in Luban, Poland, and coming to you from my hotel room, talking today about the topic of choosing richer living. So, for the past few weeks, I've been basing my talks on a book by Raymond Charles Barker called The Power of Decisions. So today I'd like to start by just reading a little bit from chapter 5 in his book entitled Decide to Live Richly, as he pulls no punches. So let's start with this. He says, the grandeur of life is known by the few when it should be known by the many. The majority of people live in part only. They are half healthy, half wealthy, half happy, and half creative. They have accepted the half way of living as normal. Once in a while, in a rare moment, they glimpse a larger life and wish that it could be so. They then return to their habitual thinking and continue to function in their half-hearted way. Half living is abnormal and unnecessary. You can live a much fuller life right where you are in your present circumstances. It does not require more money, a better job, a nicer home, or a different marriage partner. It requires a change of consciousness. And this you can do, for you are a thinker. You are the controller of your consciousness. The moment you decide to live a richer life, your consciousness will devise the ways and means of your having it. Consciousness contains total intelligence because consciousness is the action of infinite mind thinking. Your consciousness is the individuation of the total consciousness of being. That is why it will demonstrate for you a richer life when you are certain you want it and have decided to have it. It all depends on you, not the world of events, things, and people. Your mind is where you live. Your world, your body, your situation react in exact accordance to your mind, not someone else's mind, your mind. An expanded consciousness expresses in an expanded experience. This is the way the law of mind works, and it works no other way. A greater and happier outward experience requires a larger and fuller knowing in consciousness to precede it, to begin it. So, to live richly, to enjoy prosperity and abundant living is not just about money, or having stuff. To live richly is to live fully. In The Power of Decision, Raymond Charles Barker put it very simply, and his words are as true today as they were when he wrote the book. What we want to do is to demonstrate, to experience a richer life. But first, you need to know what you want, And then you need to accept it as a possibility. Believe that you could have it because, after all, your mind is where you live. So we don't want to just glimpse our possibility of good. What we want to do is learn how to actually grasp our good, accept our good. Now, this is not a teaching about self-delusion. I'm not talking about pretending things are better than they seem. Not at all. This is about beginning to change our lives by first changing our thoughts, and then allowing, accepting, or grasping the greater, fuller good that we were meant to enjoy. Because seeking our good is natural. It's a natural part of life because you are a part of life. You know, infinite mind or spirit is always giving itself to life, to the universe. Life is spirit and life is love in expansion. You're part of it, right? You're a spiritual being having a human experience. And as Barker puts it, all of life wants you to live fully. All the love there is wants you to love fully. So that's kind of the overall idea, but I wanted to go into a little more deeper explanation of these ideas of how to enjoy prosperity, how to enjoy a richer life with a metaphysical understanding. You know, there are so many books that have been written to teach the basics of prosperity and the laws of affirmation, the law of attraction. But a lot of times I find that people try these ideas without the deeper understanding of why they work. And so that can interfere with the ability of actually accepting the best results possible. So the idea about the power of decision, or the power that we have to actually choose our experience, is based on a deeper understanding of the creative principle of spirit as being life itself. So one of the things Barker has said is that expression, the fullest expression of life, is a law. And repression, or a constriction or congestion of life, is actually the very same law used in reverse, which makes it then appear to be a different law. But it isn't. It's the same law, the law of good, just used differently. So expression, repression, abundance, scarcity, wealth, poverty, health, illness, loving kindness, or hateful cruelty, courage, cowardice, happiness, or misery. All of these are expressions of life that we experience by using the very same law, the law of good, the creative principle, in different ways. It's not the result of different laws or principles. The very different outcomes result simply from our different thoughts and the way in which we use them. So ours is a metaphysical teaching. Lots of people teaching prosperity principles teach it a little bit more as ABC, follow these steps and you'll have certain results. But I want to explain the why as well as the how. So everything, and we believe this, everything, and everything itself, behind everything, and beyond everything that we can know about, there is spirit, or you might call it God, and it is formless. As formless spirit, we call it mind, infinite mind. Ernest Holmes, the founder of our teaching, said that just to be conscious is necessarily to create, because spirit has to be conscious, and therefore it must have something to be conscious of. And creation itself is actually God making something out of itself by becoming the thing it creates. Creation does not mean making something out of nothing. Creation is actually the passing of substance, the very substance of spirit itself, into form through what we call a principle, or you could call it a law. We call it the creative process. And it's set into motion by what we call the word. And in our case, by our thoughts. There's only one thing. That's the principle you've got to grab hold of. There's only one thing, spirit, God, or the thing itself. It is universal consciousness, and it is creative. There's nothing else. There's no other power. And we know it is good by the way it works. Anything that we actually experience that seems bad or unpleasant or less than what we could have is simply a result of our misuse of the law of good. There is no law of bad. So I just wanted to kind of give you a picture of the metaphysical framework behind all of the prosperity principles you've heard about. Now, each one of us actually is in a different spot in our own personal spiritual journey through life. And some people really need and are helped by taking an intellectual approach to see if ideas seem rational before they even try them out as an experiment. Other people listen with their hearts, with their intuition, and may feel comfortable simply practicing prosperity principles without needing to go through a lot of study. And still other people may just be willing to try it out, see what happens. So wherever you fall in that continuum, it's perfectly okay, whether you follow the path of the heart, the path of the intellect, or something in between. I want to let you know that there is good for you and you ought to have it. Actually, the truth is that everything alive is always seeking its good. The apple tree, for instance, just envision in your mind a simple apple tree. The apple tree seeks water, sunshine, nutrients, and support from the soil, and it also seeks to bear fruit and multiply. Even the worm or the lowliest fungi in the soil is always seeking its good in the earth itself. So nature is seeking its good. Why not us? Now, one of the first prosperity affirmations that I used to learn is this: it is my Father's good pleasure to give me the kingdom. Now, I heard it and I said it. I tried it. I tried repeating it over and over again, and I recommend it to you. It is my Father's good pleasure to give me the kingdom. Saying this repeatedly is a way to get your mind in tune and begin the process of simply becoming willing to live a richer, fuller life. It's the Father's good pleasure to give me the kingdom. So if you say that, how does it feel? Does it feel good, pleasurable? Or does it feel a little awkward? If it feels awkward, try saying us instead of me. It is our Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. Or just simply think about the apple tree, how naturally good flows to it. When it comes to prosperity, especially if you have been raised in a family or in some kind of cultural background or religion, or just a mindset that is suspicious of having money or wealth or success, then this is actually a really good place to start. We start by allowing ourselves to reverse the mindset that has come to us from the outside, from circumstances around us, from things that we've heard, from ideas that have been passed on to us that are not necessarily truthful ideas or desired ideas. One thing I recommend if you're struggling with this idea that it's okay to enjoy a fuller life is to consider the story of the prodigal son. This is a parable that Jesus recited to his followers over 2,000 years ago. And I find that it still teaches us just as well today. So on the face of it, it's a simple story of a rich man who had two sons. One used his inheritance wisely and always stayed nearby to his father. The other ran off to see the world, wasting his inheritance and ending up in the far country, impoverished, basically a beggar. Yet, when this son returned in humiliation to his father's home, there was no recrimination. There was no judgment. His father rushed out to meet him with joy. And all was restored. Ernest Holmes, the founder of our teaching, said that the moment when the prodigal son came to himself and realized he could go home, that moment represents the great awakening that each of us must make. Now, if you are a parent, I'm sure that, for some hopefully small reason or other, you have probably actually experienced the joy of having your child come home, whether they are returning from some idea that you really didn't like, or whether they were lost, or whether you're just simply glad to see them. And if you're not a parent, I'm sure you also have had some other moment in which you experienced a similar sense of overwhelming joy. This joy, this feeling of joy at someone coming home is the very same feeling of joy that you can have when you reach this moment of awakening, realizing that creative spirit, our invisible home, the kingdom of good, only wants good for us. When you recognize this, you are actually engaging in your own great awakening. You are coming to yourself, coming to your senses. Now, Holmes wrote, "Is there not plenty in the universe? Why do we want? Why do we experience lack or limitation?" In this divine awakening, there seems to be an inner witness who remembers that we came from a heavenly state. There seems to be an answer from that great within, which says the Father's house is filled with peace, plenty, and power. The universe is not limited. It is an abundant, lavish, extravagant, all-giving universe of good. So try it. Try repeating this. It is the Father's good pleasure to give me the kingdom. Understand, this kingdom lives within you. And when you feel comfortable, I'd like to suggest that you move on to another affirmation. And this is not just an affirmation. It is actually a spiritual truth. It's a spiritual truth as taught by Emma Curtis Hopkins. And she taught the founders of Unity Church and Divine Science Church. And later in her life, she also taught Ernest Holmes, our founder, who was a bit younger than the founders of those other churches. Ernest Holmes taught this. And she taught us to say this and to understand it and to know it. There is good for me and I ought to have it. It's not from a parable. It's a statement of truth. And when I first read it, I found it shocking. What? There's good for me. Okay, so there's sunshine for the apple tree. There's good for me. But the next part, I ought to have it. I ought to have it. It's my birthright. Not only is it my birthright, it's my responsibility. It's up to me. There's good for each of us, and we ought to have it. So personalize it. Say it for yourself. Try repeating it. There is good for me, and I ought to have it. There is good for me, and I ought to have it. We deserve good as much as the apple tree, as much as the worm in the soil. We deserve it because we are the children of spirit. Now, the apple tree and the worm, they live what you would think of as an unconscious life, while we humans, we live consciously. We can make choices. And our choices seem almost infinite in, abundant. You can just choose anything in accordance with natural laws, right? So we're all seeking our good. And when the prodigal son ran off, he also was seeking his good, but not in a wise way. Because you see, when we make mistakes, we're still seeking our good. But we're seeking it with ignorance by either making poor choices or maybe simply by being unconscious, or maybe by just allowing ourselves to be swept along with the crowd, allowing random or cultural factors or other people's desires to kind of determine what's happening to us. And in this situation, you may actually feel like a victim, but that's because you aren't awakening to the possibility of choice. So when you just go along willy-nilly, we do experience things we like, and we sometimes experience things we don't like. But what I'm talking about, when you decide you want to experience living more fully, richer living, there's a path you can take. That path of awakening, coming to yourself, realizing there's good for you, you ought to have it, and following up by making new choices. So maybe you need to start by thinking about what is your good. You know, prosperity in all its forms is one of the goods that we can desire and that we deserve. And prosperity is not really about having vaults stacked up with gold and silver coins. It's about how we live. It's about being able to have whatever you need when you need it, being able to enjoy what you have, and having enough to share. Prosperity is being able to do what you want when you want. And prosperity never comes at the expense of someone else or something else. In fact, that's one of the ways we can use to determine whether something is good if we think about the consequences of our possible desire. So, for instance, if your neighbor has a nice new car and you see that car, you could wish you would like that car. Oh, I would like my neighbor's car. Well, that wish is not good. We'll screen it out, because having your neighbor's car would mean that your neighbor no longer had the car. So having that type of prosperity would be harmful to your neighbor's prosperity. Instead, the better idea, the better choice is to say, aha, I see my neighbor's car. I am inspired by my neighbor's car. I would like to have a car like my neighbor's or better. So there is enough. When we realize it is so, our good does not need to come at the expense of anyone else's good. There's enough to go around. So if this is true, the question always comes up. If there's good for you, if you ought to have it, then why is there poverty, sickness, and unhappiness? It sounds crazy, but the answer is simply because of ignorance, because of fear, and because of disbelief. And I fall into this trap myself. I also must constantly work to keep my mind focused on the good. Now, Barker says that a full and rich life has to be premised on spiritual understanding. And he instructs us to think of God as mind instead of thinking of God as Superman. He also says what we need to do is expand our awareness. Think of ourselves in a larger framework. Sense the unity of all things and dedicate ourselves to right living based on affirmative and positive thinking. He says, don't fear the future. Plan the future And when you're planning, put some excitement into it. Think about your heart's desires, because all creation starts with desire. Let go of fear, let go of doubt, and begin to plan and visualize the good you would like to experience. Begin to visualize and be willing to admit that this good, your heart's desires, exist, if only as a possibility. That's the first step. Then, once you recognize that a certain thing, a certain experience, or a certain relationship is possible, then the next step is to begin to imagine having it. Because when you're working on experiencing your prosperity, you're going to find that you can do it gradually. You can take it in steps. For instance, I find it very helpful for people to remind themselves that money is just a medium of exchange. Money is a means by which the infinite spirit circulates in our world. It makes it very convenient for people to live together and to share resources well. So don't limit yourself by thinking only of money when you think of prosperity. Yet, it's fine to think of money as part of your prosperity. So if you have a desire for a better relationship, perhaps money doesn't come into it at all. You need to begin picturing yourself as having feelings of kindness. If you would like to experience more financial prosperity, perhaps having enough money to pay your rent, or perhaps you too would like to take a European vacation, then it's fine to visualize and plan for your exciting future, perhaps setting a goal of a certain amount of money. You can always say this or better. Maybe you need $70. Maybe you need $700. Maybe you need $7,000. Whatever it is, you can create a mental picture, visualize, well, it's possible that this exists. It's possible that I could have it. And then once you recognize it's possible, begin to visualize you have it in spirit, it exists in spirit, and you're open to having it in your experience now. So there's lots of ways to help you visualize this, whatever it is your own personal desire is. You can draw a picture. You can write sentences about it. You can journal what it will be like when you have it. In the case of, say you wanted a vacation, you can cut out pictures from a magazine of airplanes or however your transportation might be, or of your destination itself. There are lots of different ways to help ourselves along in gaining prosperity. But the thing that's really, really important is to know and to believe that the thing itself, life itself, surrounds you, supports you, and all good is possible. So in closing, I just want to read a final passage from The Power of Decision by Barker. He says, The infinite is always imparting itself to me. It created me in order to give itself away by means of me. I am the divine recipient of all the ideas of life, truth, and love. I now accept these ideas from the bounty which has already been given to me. My subconscious mind rejoices in this new material with its creative directives. It creates new situations better than that have gone before. These new situations are means by which I give myself a better world and to a finer humanity. I am the receiving and distributing process of the divine mind. I know myself as this. I respect myself for this. I give praise and thanks that this is so because it is so. So I hope that you will take this teaching to heart and remind yourself every day there is good for you. You ought to have it. Claim it. Enjoy it. See, and you will find. So all blessings. If you have any questions, if you'd like prayer treatment, you can go to our homepage and send us an email or contact us by phone. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much and have a wonderful week.